What do you do when the child you sacrificed everything for looks you in the eye and tells you you're worthless? I found out at 9:47 on a Tuesday morning, standing in my son's kitchen holding a coffee mug. "Pack your things," Marcus said, his voice cold as steel. "I don't need you here anymore." It was late March when Marcus called. I could hear the desperation in his voice immediately. "Mom, I need your help. Jessica got an incredible job opportunity in Singapore. It's a 6-month contract, and the money is life-changing. But we need someone to stay with the kids, someone we trust." I didn't hesitate. I was 63 years old, living in my small apartment in Ohio, working part-time at the library. My life was quiet, predictable, maybe even a little lonely. But here was my son, asking for help. Here were my grandchildren, needing me. Emma was 7, bright and curious, always asking questions about everything. Little Michael was 4, full of energy and laughter. How could I say no? Marcus and Jessica lived in Connecticut in a beautiful house with 4 bedrooms and a backyard that looked like something from a magazine. When I arrived that first week of April, Jessica gave me a quick tour, showed me the guest room where I'd be staying, and handed me a 3-page list of instructions: school schedules, meal preferences, bedtime routines, emergency contacts. She was efficient, organized, already mentally halfway to Singapore. Those first few weeks were exhausting in the most beautiful way. I woke up at 6 every morning, made breakfast, packed lunches, walked Emma to the school bus stop while pushing Michael in his stroller. We developed routines. Wednesday was library day. Friday was pizza night, where Michael would help me spread the cheese with his little hands, getting more on his face than on the dough. Saturday mornings, we'd make pancakes together, and Emma would read to her brother from her favorite books. The house was mine to manage. I cleaned, I organized, I made sure every little detail was taken care of. When Emma came home crying because a girl at school said her lunch looked weird, I held her and taught her how to make friendship bracelets. When Michael had nightmares, I was the one who rocked him back to sleep, singing the same songs I'd sung to Marcus when he was small. Marcus and Jessica called every Sunday. The calls were brief, filled with their excited chatter about temples and street markets and business meetings. "How are the kids?" they'd ask, and I'd tell them everything was wonderful, because it was. Emma's grades were improving. Michael was learning new words every day. They were happy, healthy, loved. The months passed in a blur of school projects and doctor's appointments, of bedtime stories and skinned knees, of small triumphs and everyday miracles. Emma started calling me Grandma Barbara instead of just Grandma. Michael drew pictures of our family that he proudly displayed on the refrigerator, where I stood right next to him and Emma, smiling with crayoned joy. When they arrived, pulling into the driveway on that Saturday afternoon, Emma and Michael ran outside screaming with joy. I stood in the doorway, watching Marcus hug his children, watching Jessica kneel down to cover Michael's face with kisses. My heart swelled with pride. Look at these beautiful children. Look at how well they've done. That night, we had dinner together as a family. I'd made Marcus's favorite, the pot roast I used to make every Sunday when he was growing up. Jessica talked about Singapore, showing the kids pictures on her phone. Emma told her parents about the science project she'd won an award for. Michael showed off how he could count to 20. "I know, but I don't know." Some of the things Emma said. "She talks about your mom like she's her actual parent. Grandma Barbara says we do it this way. Grandma Barbara makes it better." I'm her mother, Marcus. But Sunday passed, and Monday, and Tuesday. The atmosphere in the house changed. Jessica started taking over the morning routine, inserting herself into the patterns we'd established. When Emma asked me to help with her homework, Jessica would step in. "I've got it, Barbara. You can relax now. Pack your things. I don't need you here anymore. You can leave by tonight." I remembered the first night I'd stayed in this room. How Marcus had brought me fresh towels and said, "Make yourself at home, Mom. This is your space for as long as you need it." How Jessica had put fresh flowers on the nightstand. How Emma had snuck in after bedtime to give me one more hug. I heard small footsteps in the hallway. Emma appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide and confused. "Grandma Barbara, why are you packing?" "But this is your home," Emma said, and those words broke something in me that I'm not sure ever healed. You live here with us. Jessica appeared behind Emma, her face unreadable. Emma, honey, come downstairs. Let Grandma Barbara finish packing. Her tone was gentle, but there was steel underneath it. She put her hand on Emma's shoulder and guided her away. Emma looked back at me, tears starting to form in her eyes, and I had to turn away before she saw mine. I finished packing in silence. Every item I folded felt like burying a piece of my heart. The sweater I'd worn when Michael and I went to the park. The slippers I'd shuffled around in during early morning breakfast preparations. The book of poems Emma and I had been reading together, still bookmarked at the page where we'd stopped. I got in my car without another word. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Emma's face pressed against the living room window, her hand raised in a small wave. I waved back, and then I turned the corner and she disappeared from view. I sat on my couch and finally let myself cry. Deep, shaking sobs that hurt my chest and made my throat raw. I cried for Emma and Michael. I cried for Marcus and the distance that had grown between us. I cried for myself and the loneliness that was waiting for me like an old enemy I thought I'd escaped. I wanted to call Emma and Michael, to hear their voices, to know they were okay. But every time I picked up the phone, I hesitated. What if Jessica answered? What if I was overstepping again? What if Marcus got angry? That's when I saw Jessica's post. A photo of her and the kids at some indoor playground, all of them smiling, Emma and Michael on either side of her. The caption read, "So grateful to finally be back with my babies full time. Nothing beats being a mom. We're starting fresh and building new routines together." The second sign came 3 weeks later. Emma's birthday was coming up, October 15th. She'd be turning 8. We'd talked about it during my last week in Connecticut. She'd told me she wanted a unicorn-themed party, that she wanted to invite her whole class, that she wanted a cake with purple frosting and edible glitter. I wanted to ask about Emma's birthday, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Is she still wanting a unicorn party? I thought maybe I could help, or at least send some decorations, or... I'd never criticized Marcus or Jessica to the children. I'd never said a negative word about them. I'd shown Emma and Michael their parents' pictures every day, talked about how much Mommy and Daddy loved them, counted down the days until they'd return. The third sign came a week before Emma's birthday. Mrs. Chen from downstairs knocked on my door one afternoon. She was holding a package. Emma's birthday came and went. Marcus did set up a video call, but it lasted exactly 7 minutes. Emma was excited, showing me her unicorn cake, but Jessica kept hovering in the background, checking her watch. Michael waved at me from across the room, and then Marcus said they had to go, that the party guests were arriving, and the screen went black. 7 minutes. That's what I got for Emma's 8th birthday. I want to tell you about the dreams I started having around this time. Night after night, I'd dream I was in Marcus's house, but the rooms kept changing. I'd walk into the kitchen, and it would turn into a long hallway. I'd try to find Emma and Michael, but every door I opened led to an empty room. And somewhere in the house, I could hear children laughing, but I could never reach them. I sent Emma and Michael cards in the mail. Birthday cards, thinking of you cards, cards with cartoon characters they liked. I never knew if they received them. Marcus never mentioned them. I thought about driving back to Connecticut. Just showing up at the house, demanding to see my grandchildren, refusing to be erased. But what would that accomplish? Would Marcus call the police? Would I traumatize Emma and Michael by forcing my way into their lives? On Thanksgiving Day, I sat alone in my apartment with a frozen dinner and tried not to think about where I should have been. I tried not to think about Emma and Michael around a big table, eating turkey and stuffing, laughing with their parents. I tried not to think about the empty chair where I would have sat. Emma got on the phone. "Hi, Grandma Barbara, I miss you." "I love you," I said quickly, desperately. But I don't know if Emma heard me before the line went dead. The week after Thanksgiving, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. But then I'd remember Marcus's cold voice telling me to leave. I'd remember that check, that insulting payment for my love. I'd remember Emma's face pressed against the window as I drove away. Marcus holding baby Emma for the first time, his face full of wonder and terror in equal measure. Marcus teaching Emma to ride a bike, running alongside her with his hand on the seat. Marcus with baby Michael, that same expression of awe and fear. He opened the folder and pulled out a document. This is a property record. It shows that your son and daughter-in-law purchased a second home in late February of this year. A vacation home in the Berkshires. Purchase price, $850,000. My head was spinning. But Marcus told me Jessica got a job offer in Singapore, that they needed to go for 6 months. Mrs. Davis, there was no job in Singapore. Jessica never went to Singapore. I checked with her employer. She took a 6-month unpaid leave of absence, but she stayed in the United States. I'm saying your son and daughter-in-law asked you to watch their children so they could spend 6 months renovating and enjoying their new vacation home. They'd go up to the Berkshires for days or weeks at a time. They'd take trips. They'd essentially have a second honeymoon, all while you were caring for their children. But Marcus called me every Sunday, I said weakly. He told me about Singapore, about the temples and the markets and... These are photos from their social media accounts, Robert said gently, laying out more pictures. All of them are tagged with locations in Massachusetts, Vermont, New York. Not Singapore. He pulled out a printed email exchange. I was able to access some deleted emails from a mutual acquaintance. This is a conversation between Jessica and her sister from last February. I read the email, and with each word, my heart broke a little more. Jessica had written, "We finally found the perfect vacation house, but we need to do major renovations before it's livable. The problem is what to do with Emma and Michael. I can't take 6 months off work to supervise contractors, and we can't afford full-time childcare on top of the mortgage." Sarah suggested asking Marcus's mom, but I don't know. She can be a bit much sometimes. I spent 3 days staring at those documents. 3 days reading and rereading the emails, looking at the photos of Marcus and Jessica living their best lives while I changed diapers and helped with homework and sacrificed my own life for theirs. That was taken the same week Emma had the flu. The same week I'd stayed up for 3 nights straight, checking her temperature every 2 hours, holding her hair back when she got sick, singing to her when she couldn't sleep. The same week I'd called Marcus to let him know Emma was ill, and he'd said, "Thanks for handling it, Mom. I'm sure she'll be fine." Emma appeared at the top of the staircase. When she saw me, her whole face lit up. "Grandma Barbara." "I missed you so much," Emma whispered into my shoulder. "Why haven't you visited?" "Emma, Michael, go back upstairs," Jessica said, her voice tight. "Grandma Barbara and I need to talk." "But we just..." Emma started. "Now, Emma." There was a sharpness in Jessica's voice that made both children flinch. Emma looked at me with confused, hurt eyes, but she took Michael's hand and led him back upstairs. She looked back once before disappearing around the corner, and the sadness on her face nearly broke my resolve. "Don't lie to me, Jessica. I know about the Berkshires. I know about the vacation home. I know there was no job in Singapore. You asked for my help based on a lie. You told me you were going to Singapore for work. You let me believe I was helping you with a career opportunity, when really, you were just renovating your vacation house and having a 6-month romantic getaway." Jessica crossed her arms. "You want to know the truth, Barbara? Fine. Yes, we needed someone to watch the kids while we worked on our house. Yes, we knew you'd say yes because you're always desperate for Marcus's attention. And yes, we lied about Singapore because we knew if we told you the truth, you'd judge us for wanting time away from our own children." "Let me ask you something, Jessica," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "When you and Marcus were having romantic dinners in the mountains, when you were taking couples massages and going wine tasting, when you were living your best lives, did you think about your children at all? Did you wonder if Emma missed you when she cried at night? Did you care that Michael kept asking when Mommy was coming home? What's that supposed to mean?" Jessica demanded. I turned to her. "Do you think Emma and Michael didn't notice? Do you think they didn't wonder why you really left? Children aren't stupid, Jessica. They sense things. They know when they're being lied to, even if they don't understand the details." "Don't you dare psychoanalyze my children. They're my grandchildren too. Or have you forgotten that? A fact you seem determined to weaponize," Jessica shot back. "You think because you share DNA, you're entitled to access, To a relationship? Relationships are earned, Barbara. And frankly, after this little scene, you've done nothing but prove that Marcus was right to want distance. Distance, I repeated bitterly. Is that what you call completely cutting someone out? Because that's what this is, isn't it? You're not asking for boundaries. You're asking me to disappear. Neither of them answered, and that silence was confirmation enough. I looked around the living room. 6 months ago, I'd sat on that couch reading stories to Emma. I'd played blocks with Michael on that carpet. I'd made this house a home, filled it with love and laughter and warmth, and they wanted to erase all of it. Erase me. I have something I need to show you, I said, walking over to where I'd set down my bag. I pulled out the folder Robert had given me. What's that? Marcus asked nervously. The truth. I opened the folder and started laying photos and documents on the coffee table. Here's the property record for your vacation home in the Berkshires, purchased in February. Here's the financial withdrawal for the down payment, early March, and here. I placed down the printed email exchange between Jessica and her sister. Here's where Jessica calls me a bit much and discusses how to manipulate me into free childcare. Jessica's face went white. Marcus stared at the documents like they were poisonous snakes. Where did you get those? Jessica whispered. Does it matter? What matters is that I know the truth now. All of it. Marcus picked up the email printout, reading it with shaking hands. When he finished, he looked at Jessica. You said she'd never question it? That old people love feeling needed? Marcus, that was just... I was frustrated. I didn't mean... You called my mother pathetic, Marcus said, his voice hollow. You called her easy to manipulate. You agreed to the plan, Jessica shot back. You're the one who made the phone call. You're the one who lied about Singapore. Don't you dare act like I forced you into this. And there it was, the cracks in their perfect marriage, suddenly visible. Is that true, Marcus? I asked quietly. Did you plan this together? Was it both of you from the beginning? Marcus set down the paper. He looked like he might be sick. Yes, it was both of us. We needed help with the kids, and we couldn't afford. And you just lost Aunt Carol, and you seemed so lonely, and I thought... You thought I'd be grateful for the chance to be used. He winced. I thought it would be good for everyone. I really did, Mom. I thought you'd enjoy the time with the kids. I thought you'd feel needed and happy. I didn't think it would end like this. How did you think it would end? I asked. Did you think I'd just go quietly back to Ohio and be satisfied with occasional phone calls? Did you think I wouldn't want to stay in my grandchildren's lives? I thought you'd understand, Marcus said weakly. That it was temporary, that we'd go back to normal after. Normal, I repeated. You mean the normal where I see my grandchildren once a year at Christmas? Where you call me on Mother's Day and my birthday and consider your duty done? That normal? That's not fair. None of this is fair, Marcus. You lied to me. You manipulated me. You threw me away like I was nothing. And now you want me to understand? To accept it? To go away quietly so you don't have to feel guilty? My voice had risen again. Upstairs, I could hear Emma crying. The sound cut through everything else, sharp and painful. Now look what you've done, Jessica said. You've upset the children. I've upset them? I'm not the one who lied and manipulated and destroyed this family. You're not part of this family, Jessica said coldly. Not anymore. You're extended family at best. An extended family doesn't get to make demands. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not part of this family. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, I wasn't even considered family. Get out, Jessica continued. Get out of my house, or I'm calling the police. Let her call them, I said to Marcus, ignoring Jessica completely. Let them come. Let them hear about how you two lied to get free childcare. Let them hear about how you emotionally abused your mother. Let's make this as public as possible. You're being ridiculous, Jessica scoffed. The police aren't going to care about a family dispute. Maybe not, but your neighbors might. Your friends might. Marcus's employers might find it interesting that he's the kind of person who exploits vulnerable family members. Are you threatening us? Marcus asked, his voice hard. I'm promising you, I said. If you cut me out of those children's lives, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of people you are. Every parent at Emma's school, every person in your church, every colleague in your offices. I will tell them everything. That's blackmail, Jessica said. No. Blackmail would be if I asked for money or favors. I'm just promising to tell the truth. You're the ones who should be afraid of the truth. Marcus and Jessica looked at each other. I could see them communicating silently, making calculations, weighing options. Finally, Marcus spoke. What do you want? I want to see Emma and Michael regularly, once a month at minimum. I want video calls weekly. I want to be invited to birthdays and holidays and school events. I want to be their grandmother, not some distant relative they barely remember. That's not reasonable, Jessica said immediately. It's more than reasonable, I countered. It's less than what I deserve after 6 months of raising your children. But it's what I'm asking for. Take it or leave it. And if we refuse, Marcus asked, then I start making phone calls, starting with Emma's school. I'm sure they'd be very interested to know that her parents lied about being overseas while her grandmother provided full-time care. Might raise some questions about your judgment, your stability. It was a bluff, mostly. I wasn't sure schools would care about something like that, but I saw the fear flash across Jessica's face, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. You wouldn't, she said. Try me. We stood there in a tense standoff. Upstairs, Emma had stopped crying, but I could hear whispers. The children were probably pressed against the railing, trying to hear what was happening. Marcus, I said, softer now. I don't want to destroy your reputation. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to be part of my grandchildren's lives. Is that really so unreasonable? He looked torn, conflicted. I could see the war happening behind his eyes. Part of him, maybe, still loved me. Still remembered what we used to have. Still felt guilty for what they'd done. But Jessica spoke before he could. Fine. Once a month, supervised visits, here at our house. 1 hour, no overnights, no taking them anywhere without our permission. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was something. And weekly video calls, I pressed. 30 minutes. Jessica's jaw clenched. 20 minutes. And if you cause any problems, if you upset the children or badmouth us in any way, the visits stop immediately. I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand more. But I could see in their faces that this was as far as they'd bend. Fine, I said, but I wanted in writing a custody agreement. You don't have custody, Jessica said sharply. A visitation agreement, then. Something legal that you can't just ignore when it's convenient? Marcus finally spoke. That seems fair. I'll have my lawyer draw something up. My lawyer will review it, I said. I didn't actually have a lawyer, but I'd find one. I'd make sure this time they couldn't just change their minds and cut me out again. Jessica was still fuming, but she nodded stiffly. Fine. Are we done here? Not quite, I said. I walked to the stairs and called up. Emma, Michael, can you come down here, please? Barbara, don't you dare, Jessica started, but both children appeared at the top of the stairs before she could finish. They came down slowly, Emma holding Michael's hand. Their faces were confused, scared. They'd heard the fighting, the anger, the threats. I knelt down so I was at their level. I'm sorry you heard us arguing, I said gently. Grown-ups sometimes disagree, and we don't always handle it well. But I want you both to know something. I looked at Emma, then at Michael. I love you both very much, more than anything in the world. And no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you can always count on me. Always. Do you understand? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Are you leaving again? I have to go home today, I said. But I'm going to visit you every month, and we're going to talk on the phone every week. Your parents and I agreed on that. Okay? Promise? Michael asked in his small voice. I promise, I said, pulling them both into a hug. Behind me, I could feel Jessica's disapproval radiating like heat, but I didn't care. These children needed to know they were loved. They needed to know that not every adult in their life would lie to them or abandon them. When I finally let them go and stood up, Jessica immediately ushered them back upstairs. But not before Emma looked back at me one more time, and I saw something in her eyes that gave me hope. She saw me, really saw me, and she understood, maybe not everything, but enough. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. Marcus followed me out to the driveway. "Mom," he said as I opened my car door, "I really am sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I am." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, and I felt something I never thought I'd feel toward him: disappointment. "I believe you're sorry you got caught," I said. "I believe you're sorry you have to deal with the consequences of your actions. But I don't think you're sorry for what you did, because if you were truly sorry, you would have told me the truth 6 months ago. You would have been honest with me from the beginning. I was trying to protect you. From what? From the truth that my son sees me as useful but not valuable? That I'm someone to be used when convenient and discarded when not? You didn't protect me, Marcus. You broke my heart." I got in my car and started the engine. Marcus stood in the driveway, looking lost and small. And as I drove away, I didn't look back, because for the first time in 3 months, I wasn't running away from something. I was moving toward something new. The drive back to Ohio was different this time. I wasn't crying. I wasn't numb. I was clear-headed in a way I hadn't been in months. I'd stood up for myself. I'd confronted them. I'd won something, even if it wasn't everything I wanted. But as the miles passed and the adrenaline faded, a new feeling crept in. Not satisfaction. Something closer to dread. Because I realized what I'd done. I'd forced my way into Emma and Michael's lives through threats and ultimatums. I'd turned myself into an obligation, a legal requirement, something their parents had to tolerate rather than welcome. Was that really what I wanted? To see my grandchildren once a month in supervised visits where Jessica watched my every move? To have 20-minute video calls where Marcus or Jessica hovered in the background, making sure I didn't say the wrong thing? I'd wanted to matter. Instead, I'd become a problem to be managed. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the confrontation in my head, analyzing every word, every expression. The look on Marcus's face when he'd read Jessica's email. The contempt in Jessica's voice when she'd said I wasn't part of their family. Emma's tears. Michael's confusion. Had I made things better or worse? Around 3 a.m, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Mom, I know today was difficult. But maybe it's for the best. We all needed to be honest with each other. My lawyer will send over the visitation agreement next week. Let's try to move forward from here." Move forward. Like we'd had a simple disagreement that we could just get past. Like he hadn't destroyed my trust and broken my heart. I didn't respond. The next 2 weeks passed slowly. I went to work, came home, existed in a fog of unresolved emotions. My neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on my door one evening with homemade dumplings and a concerned expression. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "What happened?" I told her everything. The whole story spilled out. The lies, the manipulation, the confrontation. She listened without interrupting, her face growing more and more horrified. "Your son did this?" she asked when I finished. "Your own son?" "Yes." "And you're still going to see them? After what they did?" "What choice do I have? Those children are my grandchildren. I can't abandon them because their parents are—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Mrs. Chen shook her head. "You're a better person than me. I would have written them all off. But I couldn't do that. No matter how much Marcus and Jessica had hurt me, Emma and Michael were innocent. They deserved to have a grandmother who loved them, even if their parents didn't want me there." On December 27th, a thick envelope arrived in the mail, the visitation agreement Marcus's lawyer had drafted. I sat at my kitchen table and read through it carefully. Legal language filled the pages, but the meaning was clear. I was allowed to visit Emma and Michael once per month for 2 hours, not 1. Small victory there. The visits would take place at Marcus and Jessica's home. I could call the children for 20 minutes once per week at a predetermined time. I was not permitted to take the children anywhere without written consent from both parents. I was not permitted to give the children gifts worth more than $50 without prior approval. I was not permitted to discuss the events of the past 6 months with the children. That last clause made me pause. They were legally forbidding me from telling Emma and Michael the truth, from explaining why I'd left so suddenly, from defending myself against whatever narrative Marcus and Jessica chose to feed them. I was being silenced. But at the bottom of the agreement was a space for my signature. Sign it, and I'd at least have something. Refuse, and I'd have nothing. I signed it. What else could I do? I sent the signed agreement back the next day. My first scheduled visit was set for January 12th, 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to wonder what it would be like, to prepare myself emotionally, to figure out how to be a grandmother under surveillance. But then something happened that changed everything. On January 3rd, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this Barbara Davis?" "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Patricia Henning. I'm Emma's teacher at Meadowbrook Elementary. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the school records." My heart jumped. "Is Emma okay?" "Physically, yes. But Mrs. Davis, I'm concerned about her. She's been struggling since school started again in September. Her grades have dropped, she's withdrawn from her friends, and she's had several behavioral incidents that are very unlike her." "What kind of incidents?" "Crying in class, refusing to participate in activities. Last week, she got into a fight with another student. Emma's never been aggressive before. When I tried to talk to her about it, she shut down completely." I gripped the phone tighter. "Have you talked to her parents?" "I've tried. Mrs. Davis, Jessica, she seems dismissive. She says Emma is just adjusting to having them home again after their time overseas. But 6 months have passed. This doesn't seem like normal adjustment." My mind was racing. "What do you think is wrong?" Patricia hesitated. "I don't want to overstep. But Emma drew a picture in art class last week that concerned me. It showed a family, 4 people, but one was separated from the others, standing far away. When I asked her about it, she said it was her grandma. She said her grandma used to live with them, but then she left, and now she's not allowed to come back." Tears stung my eyes. "I'm her grandmother. I took care of her for 6 months while her parents were away. They asked me to leave in September." "I see," Patricia said quietly. "That explains a lot. Mrs. Davis, I think Emma is grieving. She lost someone important to her very suddenly, and she doesn't understand why. Children that age, they internalize these things. They blame themselves. I've tried to stay in contact," I said, my voice breaking. "But her parents have limited my access. I'm only allowed supervised visits once a month." "Once a month?" Patricia sounded shocked. "Mrs. Davis, forgive me for being blunt, but that's not enough. Emma talks about you constantly. She mentions you in almost every conversation. You clearly meant a great deal to her. Her mother thinks Emma got too attached to me, that I overstepped." There was a long silence. Then Patricia said, "I probably shouldn't tell you this. It could cost me my job. But last week, during recess, I overheard Emma talking to another student. She said her mom told her that grandmas are only for special occasions, that they're not real family like moms and dads." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Jessica was actively poisoning Emma against me, teaching her that grandparents don't matter, that I don't matter. "Mrs. Davis?" Patricia's voice pulled me back. "Are you still there?" "I'm here. I think Emma needs therapy, professional help to process what she's going through. But more than that, I think she needs you. Whatever happened between you and her parents, Emma needs stability and love. She needs to know she didn't do anything wrong." "I'm trying," I said, wiping tears from my face. "I'm doing everything I can." "I know this isn't my place," Patricia said carefully. "But if you're concerned about Emma's welfare, you might want to consider consulting with a family lawyer. Grandparents have rights in Connecticut. Not many people know that." After we hung up, I sat staring at the wall for a long time. Emma was suffering. My bright, happy, curious granddaughter was struggling, and no one was helping her. Her own parents were making it worse. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Patricia was right. Connecticut had grandparent visitation laws. Under certain circumstances, grandparents could petition the court for visitation rights, especially if they'd had a significant relationship with the child. 6 months of full-time care definitely qualified as significant. But filing a lawsuit against my own son? Taking him to court? The idea made me feel sick. Yet what was the alternative? Sign that restrictive visitation agreement and watch Emma suffer from a distance? Let Marcus and Jessica control every aspect of my relationship with my grandchildren? I thought about James, my late husband. What would he say if he were here? James had always been practical, logical. He'd always told me to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. And this was right. Emma needed help. Michael would eventually need it too. Those children deserved better than parents who lied and manipulated and taught them that love was conditional. The next morning, I called a family law attorney. Her name was Linda Morrison, and she had excellent reviews. When I explained my situation, she listened carefully, asking questions, taking notes. "Mrs. Davis," she said when I finished, "you have a strong case for grandparent visitation. The fact that you provided primary care for 6 months, combined with the evidence of emotional harm to the child, gives you solid ground to stand on. But I need to be honest with you. This will be expensive, and it will permanently damage your relationship with your son." "My relationship with my son is already damaged," I said. "Maybe beyond repair. But my grandchildren shouldn't have to suffer because their parents are selfish and cruel." "All right then. Let's move forward. I'll need all the documentation you have, the visitation agreement they sent you, any emails or texts, the evidence from your private investigator, everything." Over the next week, I gathered everything Linda needed. I gave her the folder from Robert Chen. I printed out every text message Marcus had sent. I wrote down a detailed timeline of everything that had happened. I even called Patricia Henning back and asked if she'd be willing to provide a statement about Emma's struggles. "Absolutely," Patricia said without hesitation. "That little girl needs someone fighting for her." Linda filed the petition on January 9th, 3 days before my scheduled visit. She warned me that Marcus and Jessica would be served with papers within 48 hours. "They're going to be furious," she said. "Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," I said. "I am." But when my phone rang on January 10th and I saw Marcus's name on the screen, my hands started shaking. I answered. "Hello, Marcus." "You're suing us?" His voice was shaking with rage. "You're actually suing us for custody?" "Not custody, visitation. There's a difference. How could you do this? How could you take us to court? How could you lie to me for 6 months?" I shot back. "How could you use me and discard me? How could you let your daughter suffer because you're too proud to admit you were wrong?" "Emma is fine." "No, Marcus, she's not. Her teacher called me. She's struggling. She's in pain. And you're making it worse by keeping me away from her. We're her parents. We know what's best for our children. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you know what's best for yourselves, and you don't care who gets hurt in the process. I can't believe you'd do this to me, after everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Marcus, what exactly have you done for me? You used me. You manipulated me. You threw me away. And now you're angry that I won't go quietly?" "You're going to regret this," Marcus said, his voice cold. "We'll fight you, and we'll win. And when we do, you'll never see Emma or Michael again. Not for visits, not for calls. Never." "Then I guess I have nothing to lose," I said, and hung up. My hands were still shaking. My heart was pounding. But underneath the fear and the pain, I felt something else. Resolve. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Not when Emma needed me. Not when I'd finally found the courage to fight back. The court date was set for February 15th, 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to prepare, to gather evidence, to make my case. 6 weeks to prove that I mattered, that I was family, that love couldn't be erased with legal agreements and supervised visits. I was going to war with my own son, and I was going to win. The 6 weeks before the court date were the longest of my life. Longer than the weeks after James died. Longer than the months after Marcus kicked me out. Because this time, I wasn't just grieving. I was preparing for battle. Linda Morrison became my lifeline. She prepared me for what to expect, coached me on how to answer questions, warned me about the tactics Marcus and Jessica's lawyer would likely use. "They're going to paint you as overbearing," she said during one of our meetings. "They're going to say you overstepped boundaries, that you tried to replace Jessica as the children's mother. They're going to use your desperation against you." "Let them," I said. "The truth is on my side." "The truth doesn't always win in family court," Linda warned. "But we have a strong case. Just stick to the facts, stay calm, and let me do most of the talking." I couldn't eat. I barely slept. Every night I rehearsed what I'd say in court. Every morning I woke up terrified that I'd made a terrible mistake, that I was making everything worse. But then I'd think about Emma, about her drawing of the family with one person standing far away, about her crying in class, fighting with other students, withdrawing from the world. And I knew I was doing the right thing. The scheduled visit on January 12th never happened. Marcus sent me a text the day before. "Under the circumstances, we don't think it's appropriate for you to visit. Our lawyer has advised us to cease all contact until the court makes a decision." I showed the text to Linda. She smiled grimly. "Perfect. That actually helps our case. They're proving that they're willing to use the children as weapons." I tried to call Emma on her scheduled call day anyway. Jessica answered Marcus's phone. "Don't call here again," she said, and hung up before I could say a word. Every day without hearing Emma and Michael's voices was torture. I wondered if they thought I'd abandoned them again. If they blamed themselves. If Jessica was telling them terrible things about me. The only bright spot in those dark weeks was Patricia Henning. She called me once a week to update me on Emma's condition. It wasn't improving. "She asked me yesterday if her grandma was dead," Patricia told me during one call, her voice thick with emotion. "She said her mom told her that sometimes people go away and never come back. I didn't know what to tell her, Mrs. Davis. I couldn't tell her the truth without overstepping, but I couldn't let her think you were dead." "What did you say?" "I told her that sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, but that doesn't mean the people who love us stop loving us. I told her that her grandma thinks about her every single day." I hope that was okay. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for being there for her when I can't be." February 15th arrived cold and gray. I dressed carefully that morning in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Carol's funeral. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. I'd lost weight. My face looked drawn, older, but my eyes were different, harder, determined. Linda met me at the courthouse at 8:30. "Remember," she said as we walked through security, "stay calm. Don't let them provoke you. Answer the questions honestly, but don't volunteer extra information. And most importantly, remember why we're here, for Emma and Michael." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Fluorescent lights, wooden benches, a judge's bench at the front. It looked so ordinary for a place where people's lives were decided. Marcus and Jessica were already there with their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit named Helen Vasquez. Marcus wouldn't look at me. Jessica glared with pure hatred. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. The judge entered. The Honorable Margaret Caldwell, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. "Let's begin," she said. "This is a petition for grandparent visitation filed by Barbara Davis regarding her minor grandchildren, Emma Davis, age 8, and Michael Davis, age 4. Ms. Morrison, you may present your opening statement." Linda stood. "Your Honor, this case is about a grandmother who provided 6 months of full-time care to her grandchildren, who developed a deep and meaningful bond with them, and who is now being systematically excluded from their lives by parents who are more concerned with their own pride than their children's well-being. Will demonstrate that this exclusion is causing measurable harm to at least one of the children, and that regular visitation with Mrs. Davis is in the best interests of both Emma and Michael Davis." Helen Vasquez stood next. "Your Honor, This case is about parents trying to establish healthy boundaries with an overbearing grandmother who refuses to accept that her temporary role as caregiver has ended. While the petitioner did provide childcare for 6 months, that arrangement was always intended to be temporary. The parents have offered reasonable visitation, which Mrs. Davis rejected before filing this lawsuit. This is an attempt to use the courts to force her way into a family that has the right to set its own boundaries. Judge Caldwell nodded. Ms. Morrison, call your first witness. I call Barbara Davis to the stand. My legs felt like water as I walked to the witness stand. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Linda started with easy questions. My name, my age, my relationship to the children. Then she moved into the timeline. Mrs. Davis, can you tell the court how you came to care for Emma and Michael? I took a deep breath. In March of last year, my son Marcus called me. He said his wife Jessica had received a job opportunity in Singapore for 6 months. He asked if I could move to Connecticut to care for the children while they were overseas. I agreed immediately. And did you provide that care? Yes. For 6 months, from April through September, I lived in their home and cared for Emma and Michael full-time. I got them up in the morning, made their meals, took them to school, helped with homework, put them to bed. I was their primary caregiver. How would you describe your relationship with the children during that time? We became very close. Emma and I would read together every night. Michael and I would make pancakes every Saturday morning. We had routines, traditions. They called me Grandma Barbara. They told me they loved me, and I loved them with all my heart. What happened in September? Marcus and Jessica came home. 3 days later, Marcus told me to pack my things and leave. He said they didn't need me anymore. How did that make you feel? Devastated, confused. I'd given 6 months of my life to caring for those children, and suddenly I was being dismissed like hired help, whose contract had ended. Helen Vasquez stood. Objection. The witness's feelings aren't relevant to the question of what's in the children's best interest. Your Honor, Linda countered, Mrs. Davis's emotional state is relevant to understanding the relationship she had with the children and the impact of the sudden separation. I'll allow it, Judge Caldwell said. Continue. Linda nodded. Mrs. Davis, did you later discover information about why your son had asked you to care for the children? Yes. I hired a private investigator. I learned that Jessica never went to Singapore. There was no job opportunity. They'd purchased a vacation home in the Berkshires and spent those 6 months renovating it and taking trips. They lied to me. A murmur went through the courtroom. Judge Caldwell's eyebrow raised slightly. Do you have evidence of this? Linda handed over the folder from Robert Chen. Your Honor, we're submitting property records, financial documents, and social media posts that corroborate Mrs. Davis's testimony. Judge Caldwell spent several minutes reviewing the documents. Her expression darkened. Helen Vasquez stood quickly. Your Honor, how my clients chose to spend their time while their children were being cared for isn't relevant to this case. They had every right to take time for themselves. Ms. Vasquez, Judge Caldwell said coolly, I'm less concerned with how they spent their time and more concerned with the fact that they apparently lied about their whereabouts. That goes to credibility. I'll allow this evidence. I saw Marcus shift uncomfortably in his seat. Linda continued, Mrs. Davis, after you discovered the truth, what happened? I confronted Marcus and Jessica. They admitted they'd lied. I asked to maintain regular contact with Emma and Michael. They refused. They offered 1-hour supervised visits once a month and 20-minute phone calls once a week, under threat that if I didn't accept those terms, I'd never see the children again. Did you accept those terms? I felt I had no choice. But then I received a phone call from Emma's teacher, Patricia Henning. She told me Emma was struggling in school, that she was crying in class, withdrawn from friends, had gotten into fights. She said Emma was grieving the loss of me and didn't understand why I'd left. And that's when you decided to file this petition? Yes, because I realized this wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my hurt feelings or my broken relationship with my son. It was about Emma and Michael. They were suffering, and I couldn't stand by and watch it happen. Linda returned to her seat. Your witness. Helen Vasquez approached. She had the cold, calculated look of a predator circling prey. Mrs. Davis, you testified that you loved those children with all your heart. Would you say you became very attached to them during those 6 months? Yes, of course. They're my grandchildren. Would you say you became so attached that you started to see yourself as their primary parent rather than their grandmother? I hesitated. I don't know what you mean. Let me be more specific. During those 6 months, did you ever make decisions about the children without consulting my clients? Small decisions, yes. What to make for dinner, which books to read, things like that. But anything important, I always called Marcus. Did you take Emma to get her ears pierced? My stomach dropped. She begged me to. Other girls in her class had pierced ears, and she felt left out. Did you ask permission from her parents? I tried to call Marcus, but he didn't answer, and Emma was so excited, I thought. You thought you knew better than her parents what was appropriate for their daughter? That's not what I meant. Mrs. Davis, isn't it true that you began to undermine my client's authority with their own children? That you established routines and rules that contradicted what the parents wanted? No, I followed their instructions. They left me a list. A list from April. Did you follow that list for 6 months, or did you start making your own rules? I adjusted things as needed. The children grew. Their needs changed. Without consulting the parents? I called Marcus every week. He always said everything was fine. Because he trusted you, Mrs. Davis. He trusted you not to overstep, and you violated that trust. Objection. Linda stood. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Caldwell said. Ms. Vasquez, ask your questions without the editorial comments. Helen changed tactics. Mrs. Davis, you mentioned hiring a private investigator. How much did that cost? I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question, please. About $2,000. And you're paying for an attorney in this case. How much is that costing you? I don't know the final amount yet. But several $1,000s at least. Yes. So you're spending thousands of dollars to force your way into your grandchildren's lives rather than respecting their parents' boundaries? I'm fighting for my right to see my grandchildren. There's a difference. Is there? Mrs. Davis, isn't it true that you're doing this out of spite? Because you're angry at my clients for ending the childcare arrangement? No. I'm doing this because Emma is suffering. According to one teacher's opinion. According to someone who sees Emma every day and cares about her welfare. Mrs. Davis, do you have any professional training in child psychology? No. Are you qualified to diagnose Emma with any kind of trauma or psychological condition? I don't need a degree to see that a child is in pain. But you do need one to determine what's causing that pain and how to treat it, don't you? Isn't it possible that Emma's struggles have nothing to do with you? That she's simply adjusting to a new school year, or dealing with social issues, or experiencing any number of normal childhood challenges? I know my granddaughter. I know when something is wrong. You knew your granddaughter 6 months ago. Children change quickly at that age. Maybe you don't know her as well as you think you do anymore. The words stung because there was truth in them. 6 months was a long time in a child's life. Had Emma changed? Had I missed important developments because I'd been kept away? Helen pressed her advantage. Mrs. Davis, let me ask you directly. If you win this case, if the court grants you regular visitation, what do you think will happen? I'll be able to see my grandchildren, to maintain a relationship with them. And what about their parents? You've sued them. You've attacked their credibility. You've called them liars in open court. Do you think they'll ever forgive you for this? I don't know. Do you think it's in Emma and Michael's best interest to be caught in the middle of this conflict? To know that their grandmother and their parents are enemies? Their parents created this conflict, not me. That's not what I asked. Answer the question. Is it in the children's best interest to be in the middle of this war? I looked at Marcus. He was staring at his hands, his face pale. Jessica was crying quietly, and I realized Helen Vasquez had a point. By fighting this battle, was I making things worse for Emma and Michael? No, I said quietly. It's not in their best interest. But neither is keeping them away from someone who loves them. Neither is teaching them that family is disposable. Neither is letting them think they did something wrong when they didn't. No further questions, Helen said, returning to her seat. Linda called Patricia Henning next. The teacher testified about Emma's behavioral changes, her emotional struggles, her constant mentions of her grandmother. In my professional opinion, Patricia said, Emma is experiencing grief and confusion from the sudden loss of a primary caregiver. She needs stability and consistency. She needs to know that the people who love her aren't going to disappear without explanation. Helen cross-examined her, suggesting that Emma's issues could be caused by dozens of other factors. But Patricia held firm. Then Linda called someone I didn't expect. A child psychologist named Dr. Rachel Stern, who'd reviewed Emma's case at Linda's request. Based on my review of Emma's school records and behavioral reports, Dr. Stern testified, this child is exhibiting classic signs of disrupted attachment. She formed a secure bond with her grandmother during a critical developmental period, and that bond was abruptly severed. Children need consistency and predictability. When those are removed suddenly, especially without explanation, it can cause significant psychological distress. In your professional opinion, would regular contact with her grandmother benefit Emma? Absolutely, assuming the visits are positive and the grandmother doesn't engage in any alienating behavior toward the parents. Maintaining that relationship would help Emma understand that people can still love her even when circumstances change. It would provide stability and continuity. Helen tried to discredit Dr. Stern, pointing out that she'd never actually met Emma. But the damage was done. Finally, Judge Caldwell said, I'd like to speak with Emma myself. In chambers, with counsel present, but without the parties. My heart jumped. Emma would testify? She was only 8 years old. Your Honor, Helen objected. The child is very young. This could be traumatic. Ms. Vasquez, I'm not going to interrogate her. I simply want to ask her a few age-appropriate questions. I'm well versed in speaking with children. This is my courtroom, and this is my decision. 20 minutes later, Emma was brought into the courthouse. I saw her walk past with a court officer, her face pale and scared. She glanced into the courtroom, and our eyes met for just a second. Then she was gone, led to the judge's chambers. The wait was agonizing. Marcus and Jessica sat rigid in their seats. I twisted my hands in my lap, praying Emma would be okay, that this wouldn't traumatize her further. After 30 minutes, Judge Caldwell returned to the bench. Emma didn't come back into the courtroom. She'd been taken to a waiting room. The judge's face was unreadable. I've spoken with Emma, she said, and I've reviewed all the evidence presented today. I'm prepared to make my ruling. My heart stopped. This is a complex case, Judge Caldwell continued. On one hand, parents have a fundamental right to raise their children as they see fit, including deciding who has access to them. On the other hand, grandparents who have established significant relationships with their grandchildren have rights as well, particularly when there's evidence that the children's well-being is at stake. She paused, looking at both sides. I find that Mrs. Davis did provide substantial care to these children for 6 months. I find that she formed meaningful bonds with them. I also find that the respondents, Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Davis, were less than truthful with the petitioner about the reasons for needing that care. Marcus and Jessica exchanged looks. However, the judge continued, I also find that Mrs. Davis's role was always intended to be temporary, and that parents do have the right to establish boundaries with extended family, even grandparents. My heart sank. That said, I'm troubled by several things. I'm troubled by Emma's behavioral issues and the testimony suggesting they stem from the abrupt termination of her relationship with her grandmother. I'm troubled by the respondent's willingness to completely cut off contact over what appears to be wounded pride. And I'm troubled by the fact that they suspended even the minimal visitation they'd previously agreed to simply because Mrs. Davis filed this petition. She looked directly at Marcus and Jessica. Parents who use their children as weapons in disputes with other adults are not acting in their children's best interests. And that's what you've done here. You've allowed your anger at Mrs. Davis to override your children's needs. Jessica started to speak, but Helen put a hand on her arm to stop her. I'm granting Mrs. Davis's petition, Judge Caldwell said, but not in the way either side has requested. She pulled out a document. Mrs. Davis will have visitation with Emma and Michael twice per month for 4 hours each visit. These visits will initially be supervised by a neutral third party, not the parents. After 3 months, if the visits are going well, the supervision requirement will be dropped. Mrs. Davis will also have weekly video calls with the children for 30 minutes. Relief flooded through me so intensely I felt dizzy. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm ordering family therapy. All parties, including Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Davis and Mrs. Barbara Davis, will attend joint therapy sessions to address the underlying issues in this family and to learn how to co-parent effectively for the benefit of the children. Marcus stood. Your Honor, with all due respect. Sit down, Mr. Davis. I'm not finished. He sat. I'm also ordering individual therapy for Emma. This child needs professional help to process what she's experienced. And I'm putting you all on notice. I will be monitoring this case. If any of you violate this order, if you attempt to interfere with visitation, if you engage in parental alienation or any other behavior that harms these children, you will answer to me. And I guarantee you won't like the result. Is that clear? We all nodded. Good. My clerk will provide the formal written order. This hearing is adjourned. She banged her gavel and left the bench. I sat there, stunned. I'd won. Not everything I'd wanted, but more than I'd dared hope for. Twice monthly visits, weekly calls. And Marcus and Jessica couldn't cut me off anymore. Linda squeezed my hand. You did it. Across the aisle, Marcus and Jessica were having a heated, whispered conversation with their lawyer. Then Marcus stood and walked over to me. This isn't over, he said quietly. You may have won today, but you've destroyed our relationship. You know that, right? I looked at my son, and I saw a stranger. You destroyed our relationship the day you decided to use me, I said. I'm just the one who refused to pretend everything was okay. He walked away without another word. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The first supervised visit happened 2 weeks after the court ruling. A woman named Sandra Green met me at a neutral location, a family center with a playroom designed for exactly these situations. Supervised visits. Court-ordered contact between family members who'd gone to war. I arrived 30 minutes early, my hands shaking, my heart racing. What would I say to Emma and Michael? How would I explain everything that had happened? How would I make them understand that I'd never wanted to leave them? When they walked in with Sandra, Emma stopped in the doorway. She looked at me like she wasn't sure I was real, like maybe I was a ghost she'd conjured up from missing me so hard. Grandma Barbara? Her voice was so small. I knelt down, opening my arms. Hi, sweetheart. She ran to me, just ran, her backpack still on, her coat half unzipped, and crashed into me so hard we both almost fell over. She was crying, and I was crying, and Michael was crying because he didn't fully understand what was happening. But he knew something important was occurring. I thought you didn't want to see me anymore. Emma sobbed into my shoulder. I thought I did something bad, and that's why you left. My heart shattered all over again. No, baby, no, no, no. You didn't do anything wrong, not one single thing. I never wanted to leave you. I fought so hard to come back to you. Mom said grandmas are only for holidays, Emma whispered. I pulled back and looked into her eyes. Your mom was wrong about that. Grandmas are for every day, for bad days when you need a hug, for good days when you want to share your happiness, for ordinary days when nothing special is happening but you just want company. Grandmas are family, Emma, real family, and real family doesn't disappear. Michael climbed onto my lap. Gamma Babawa, we can make pancakes? I laughed through my tears. Not here, buddy, but next time at a different place, yes. We'll make pancakes with extra chocolate chips, just like we used to. Those 4 hours flew by. We colored pictures, we read books. We talked about school and friends and all the little moments I'd missed. Emma showed me a loose tooth. Michael demonstrated how high he could jump. And slowly, piece by piece, we started rebuilding what had been broken. When it was time to leave, Emma held on to me so tight that Sandra had to gently remind her that we'd see each other again in 2 weeks. "Promise?" Emma asked. "I promise. The judge said so, and judges' promises are serious promises." The visits continued. Every 2 weeks, then every week once the supervision ended. Marcus and Jessica never came to pickups or drop-offs. They sent a nanny, a kind woman named Rosa, who seemed sympathetic to the whole situation. The family therapy sessions were brutal. Sitting in a room with Marcus and Jessica, a therapist named Dr. Helen Foster mediating between us, trying to excavate the wreckage of our relationships. Marcus barely spoke during the first few sessions. Jessica did most of the talking, defending their actions, insisting they'd done nothing wrong. But Dr. Foster was good at her job. She didn't let them hide. "Jessica," she said during our 4th session, "you keep saying you did nothing wrong, but your actions resulted in significant emotional harm to your daughter. How do you reconcile those 2 things?" Jessica's face crumpled. "I didn't mean to hurt Emma. I was trying to protect my role as her mother. Barbara was taking over, and I felt like I was being replaced." "Did you tell Barbara you felt that way?" "No." "Did you try to have a conversation about boundaries before asking her to leave?" "No." "So instead of communication, you chose elimination. You removed Barbara completely rather than finding a middle ground." Jessica didn't answer. Dr. Foster turned to Marcus. "And you, Marcus, you went along with a plan to deceive your mother. Why?" Marcus finally spoke. "Because I'm weak. Because I wanted what I wanted, and I didn't think about the cost. I didn't think about how Mom would feel. I just thought about me and Jessica and our marriage." It was the first honest thing he'd said in months. "And now?" Dr. Foster asked. "Now that you see the cost?" "Now I don't know how to fix it," Marcus said quietly. "I don't know if it can be fixed." I spoke then. "I don't need everything fixed, Marcus. I don't need us to go back to how things were. But I need you to see me, to acknowledge what you did, to stop pretending I'm the villain in this story." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since the court case. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. It wasn't enough. Maybe nothing would ever be enough, but it was something." Over the following months, things slowly, painfully began to shift. Emma started therapy with a child psychologist who helped her understand that the adults in her life had made mistakes, but that those mistakes weren't her fault. Michael, too young to fully grasp what had happened, just seemed happy to have his grandma Barbara back. My visits with them became the highlight of my life. We went to parks and museums. We made those pancakes Michael had asked about. We created new traditions while honoring the old ones. And slowly, Emma's teacher reported that she was improving, smiling more, engaging with friends. The darkness that had settled over her was lifting. Marcus and I never fully reconciled. Our relationship remained fractured, held together by court orders and therapy appointments and a shared love for his children. But we learned to coexist, to be civil, to put Emma and Michael first. Jessica and I would never be friends. But after months of therapy, we reached an understanding. She admitted she'd felt threatened by the bond I'd formed with the children. I admitted that maybe I had overstepped in some ways, had gotten too comfortable in a role that was never meant to be permanent. We agreed to communicate better, to respect each other's place in the children's lives, to stop seeing each other as enemies. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, almost a year after that terrible day when Marcus kicked me out, I was putting Emma to bed after a visit at my apartment. She'd started having occasional overnights, and we'd turned my second bedroom into a space just for her and Michael. "Grandma Barbara?" Emma said as I tucked her in. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart. Why did you keep fighting to see us? Even when Dad and Mom said no? Even when it was really hard?" I sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her face. Because loving someone means showing up, even when it's difficult. It means fighting for the relationship, even when it would be easier to walk away. And because you and Michael are worth fighting for, you're worth everything. "I'm glad you fought," she whispered. "Me too, baby. Me too." As I turned off her light and closed her door halfway, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the court case, the slow, painful rebuilding. Had it been worth it? The money I'd spent, the relationship with Marcus that might never fully heal, the stress and pain and heartbreak? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Because Emma was sleeping peacefully in the next room, knowing she was loved. Because Michael called me every week on video, showing me his latest drawings. Because I'd learned something crucial about myself. I was stronger than I'd ever known. For so long, I'd defined myself by my relationships to other people. Wife, mother, grandmother, caregiver. I'd thought my value came from being useful, from being needed, from sacrificing myself for others. But I'd learned that I had value simply because I existed, that my needs and feelings mattered, that setting boundaries and demanding respect wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I'd learned that love shouldn't require you to erase yourself, that family should build you up, not tear you down, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is fight back. And I'd learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Even at 63 years old, even after decades of putting everyone else first, even when everyone tells you to be quiet and accept what you're given. You can still say no. You can still demand better. You can still fight. I don't know what the future holds for me and Marcus. Maybe someday we'll find our way back to something resembling the relationship we once had. Maybe we won't. But I've made peace with that uncertainty. Because I know this. Emma and Michael will grow up knowing they have a grandmother who loves them fiercely, who fought for them, who never gave up, even when it would have been easier. They'll know that family isn't just about biology. It's about showing up. It's about commitment. It's about love that doesn't quit. And maybe, when they're older and facing their own challenges, they'll remember their Grandma Barbara who refused to disappear quietly, who stood up for herself and for them, who proved that you're never too old, never too broken, never too defeated to fight for what matters. That's the legacy I want to leave them. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, honest, unbreakable. Because in the end, that's what love is. Not smooth or easy or painless, but worth fighting for. Always worth fighting for.